Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar hosted by ASA, CSSA, and SSSA, the Women in Science Committee, and supported by our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. I'm Susan Chapman, the Director of Special Projects at the Societies, and I'll be your host for the day. For this webinar, Managing Stress, Mental Wellness, and Compassion Fatigue for Agriculturalists. Before we get started, we have a couple of quick notes. Please enter your questions in the Q&A section at any time using the question icon up at the upper right. We'll address them at the end. If you experience any technical difficulties, you can call our support center at 608-273-8080. This information is also posted in the chat. Excuse me. Today's webinar is worth 1.0 CEUs, and to receive credit, you'll need to stay for the full webinar until the end. The credit will be posted to your account shortly after. So let's get started. Our moderator today is Dr. Lakshmi Manavalan. Dr. Manavalan is a Senior Program Officer at the Gates Foundation, where she leads global efforts in crop R&D innovations in the input space. She also serves as the current chair of the ACS Women in Science Committee. With over 20 years of experience working with farmers, spanning field trial management, R&D leadership in the corporate sector, and global grant making, she brings a deep, hands-on understanding of the agricultural landscape. Lakshmi is passionate about resilient food systems and mental wellness in agriculture, and she's excited to be part of today's important discussion. Dr. Manavalan, I will pass the mic off to you to introduce our speakers and get us started.
Thank you very much, Susan, for the great introduction. I'm very pleased to introduce our two speakers today for this webinar. Doris Mold, welcome to this webinar. Doris is a co-CEO, farmer, agricultural consultant, agricultural economist, business and risk management expert, educator, researcher, and business person. She wears many hats as an ag advocate, ag stress maven, connector, and catalyst. Wearing many hats in agriculture and her vast lived experience has allowed her unique insight into how agricultural stress impacts us across agriculture. Isn't it a great problem? She has developed stress management and mental wellness programs for agriculturalists alongside mental health professionals and works with these professionals and lay people to deliver this programming. Mold has received extensive training and continuing education in suicide prevention and mental health resiliency topics. She was a panelist in our Women in Science Committee workshop last year, so please, nice to meet you again. Our next speaker is Monica McConkie. Monica is a licensed professional counselor and owner of Eyes of the Horizon, which is an organization that focuses on mental health in agriculture. She works directly with farmers, ranchers, and their families, as well as ag industry, providing training, counseling, and support. Doris and Monica, thank you, and I will turn the microphones over to you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate the opportunity to be here. And just a little bit of a review, Monica and I work in tandem in a lot of situations. We've been working together since 2018 on ag stress programming, and you heard a little bit about us. And today I'm going to be focusing a little bit on ag stress, the agrarian imperative, and then later on I'll be talking about some of the mental wellness programming that's available. And Monica is going to be discussing the impact of stress response, compassion fatigue, and resilience. Before we get started, Monica is going to pull up Poll Everywhere, and she'll explain what we're going to be doing with that.
Yes, so to help with interaction, we're going to be using an anonymous poll app. It's not really an app, you don't have to download anything, but it allows us to have interaction and to see responses that are completely anonymous. So let's get set up for that. There are a couple ways to get set up. You can grab your cell phone and go to your texting app and text the code you see there, Monica, MCCONK 993, to the number 22333. Or on the very next slide with our first poll, there will be a QR code that you can also use to get into the system. When you text, you'll have a message pop up letting you know that you are a part of this session. And that's all you have to do. And then just answer the polls from here on in. So we'll just give a few seconds here for those of you using your phone to get that set up. Again, you'll text Monica, MCCONK 993 to the number 22333.
And maybe, Monica, if we go to the next slide, some people like using that QR code instead. So you can go ahead and use that QR code if that's more comfortable. And then if you don't have your phone and you'd like to join, you can join on your computer as well using that web address that you see at the top.
So our first polling question is, what is your role within agriculture? So you can go ahead and text in your response, or if you're using your QR code there, you can type in your response. So we have them rolling in here. We have people from Extension, we have a farmer, a consultant, an educator, crop specialist in retail ag, management in HR, an agronomist, environmental consulting, seed production manager. Oh, I just love the diversity and the range of folks that we have represented here. An economist, ag industry marketing, grain merchandiser, educator and researcher, environmental professional, government agronomist, principal investigator, a grad student. Oh, we love our students. Cotton ginner, a professor, seed sales. What an amazing group.
Right.
In the egg industry. Okay, so that gives us a sense, and we may not have everybody's response roll through just for the sake of time,
Right.
but we wanted, number one, to make sure the poll is working. Number two, to get a good sense of who's here on the call.
Right.
Okay,
Well,
thank you for that.
Yes. So now that we've figured out that Poll Everywhere is working, first thing that we need to do as we're getting into thinking about mental wellness and managing stress is we need to maybe reflect on what is stressing us out. So we have another poll. So we're going to ask you, what stresses you out? We'd like one word if you can. And if it's a two-part answer, then you can put the two words together. I guess we're still getting people responding to.
Yeah, we had a response roll in from the previous poll, so we'll just ignore the soil scientist one. Okay, people cause the stress.
I was going to say, but potentially maybe being a soil scientist might cause you some stress too. Who knows? But
that could be.
So we've got weather, people, soil, finances. Weather's a big one. Control, customers. Okay. Technology. Uncertainty. Okay.
And these are a lot of stressors that are work related.
Yep.
You can kind of spread out a little bit more, and even personally, what's causing you stress in your personal lives.
Well, I mean, we've got all sorts of things that are coming up here as we see. We even have wolves and tariffs, overcommitment, researcher, planning, control, secrecy, environment, wildfires, stress, phone, deadline, lots of things, costs. But those big things, the uncertainty, the people, the time, the weather, those are the things that seem to be more prevalent with more of you, but it keeps changing. So now we've got some idea of what's stressing you out. Are you more or less stressed than you were a year ago?
So if you're more stressed, you'd just type in an A. If you're less stressed, you type in a B. If there's no change from last year to this year, type in a C.
So a few people are less stressed. Okay, more stressed is no change. So either the more stressed people answered a lot on the previous poll, or the no change people are equally stressed out to what they were last time. So few people less stressed, which is a little bit surprising to us, because I know Monica and I both in our stress work are finding that people are more stressed, but this is interesting to see a little diversity in the crowd, but still a pretty high percentage that are kind of on that more stressed level, and that's kind of what we're seeing too. Okay, so you're similar to other agricultural, kind of across the agricultural board that we work with. So let's talk a little bit about stress and agriculturalists. As we look at things, there's a lot of things, as you can see, that impact you. And some of you are into production ag in addition. So, this is more broadly for all agriculturalists. I'll talk a little bit about farmers' stress here in a moment or two. But that uncertainty and change really came out in that that was a huge one, and that's top of the list for most people, especially now. And that change, we didn't dive down into specifics such as tariffs and the constant changing of what's going on in the world. But that uncertainty and change is an overriding thing. And I think too, doing more with less is a huge one for many of us. And then I didn't see any mention of this, but major life events have an impact. Changing jobs, graduating, getting married, having a death in the family, all of the moving, all of those things can cause issues. Also, work and school. For a lot of people that are either students or on the educator side, we have finals. If you're on a semester system, you're probably into finals right now, or maybe you've already had them, or you're coming up. For those of you who are in the grad school, you're working on your research, your thesis, your defense, all of those things. And then for the professor side of thing, the educator, of course, then you end up having to do all the grading and advising and things like that. Health is a huge one. Health has major impacts, and we're not just talking about physical health, but definitely the head health. And we're going to get a lot more into that. Monica is going to be covering that in just a few moments. Relationship challenges, lack of support. There was a little bit on financial or funding. That has an impact both professionally and personally. And taking on the stress of others, and we're going to be addressing the compassion fatigue in a bit, but that's a huge one for most of us. If we're working with other people, we're taking on other people's stress, and that is a very common thing. And if you're dealing with a whole bunch of stressed out people, it would be hard not to pull some of that into your own life. And so and we saw the list beforehand, huge list. So let's take a look then at stress in farmers. Now, farmers have the same stressors as anybody else, but there's some other added elements, and one of it has to do with land. And this is a quote from Michael Rossman, but ownership of the family farm is that really triumphant result of struggles from multiple generations. And losing that family farm is really the ultimate loss. It brings shame to the generation that lost it. They look at that they have let down their forebears, and they're dashing the hopes for successors. And that really enters into the psyche of many of our farm families. And so that leads us to the agrarian imperative, which instills in farmers, the ability to work incredibly hard to endure unusual pain and hardship and to take uncommon risks. And I'm a farmer myself. I come from a farm family, multiple generations, so does Monica. And one of the things is that even when times are tough, you'll give up practically everything else to hang on to that family farm. There is just something that is, almost in our DNA.
Mhm.
And when you lose that ability, that impacts people greatly. And so that's part of the reason why we see a higher rate of suicide in our rural communities with our farmers. And in fact, we'll see 2.5 to 3 times the rate. But in England, when they were having problems with foot and mouth disease and mad cow disease, they found, and they had to destroy whole herds of livestock, they found a tenfold increase in the rate of suicide amongst farmers. And part of it is this agrarian imperative. And that's huge. So some of the other things that are impacting farmers that might not impact general society is, that unpredictability of income. They don't get a regular paycheck. I know any of us can lose our job, lose our paycheck, but this is a constant for farmers unless, they're direct marketing and able to set their own price. But the majority of farmers, they sell commodity products, and at variable or low commodity prices, unpredictability is huge. And then some of you did mention weather in the stressors, weather-related crop loss, planting and harvesting delays, another big one. We're dealing with a lot of stressed out farmers. People weren't able to get in the fields. Now it's really warm. Now it's going to get cold again. And that back and forth is very challenging. Machinery breakdown, the physically demanding job, long hours, and the high likelihood that you could have a disabling injury. That any kind of health crisis really puts the farm at higher risk because there's usually not somebody to step in and take your place. And then raising livestock produces more stress than crops because you have animals, and farmers are very connected to their animals. And as I said in my example from England, that 10 times increase because they lost all of their animals. And they're very tied to that, and having sickness or illness in the animals, we've seen that too, with turkey flocks, with bird flu. We saw it during the pandemic. Hog farmers not being able to sell their hogs and having to destroy animals, that creates an immense amount of stress. And then again, losing the farm or ranch, those foreclosures or mortgages, huge, because losing that would be losing everything to them. Now, one of the things that often is forgotten in both resources and research is the role of women in agriculture. So I'm just going to spend a moment or two on that. I work on a project called Cultivating Resiliency, and for women in agriculture. And in 2019 and 2021, we did a survey of women in agriculture, and we're planning on doing another follow-up survey. And these were from women in agriculture across the country. So nearly 90% of the women that were surveyed, and we surveyed hundreds, experienced stress related to agriculture. And so there is a pervasiveness in agriculture, of agriculture just being an occupational stressor. And if we look at some other specifics that we came across, the respondents reported similar things to what we see as general stressors for agriculturalists and for farmers, but we kind of pinpointed some other things. So the financial worries, commodity anxiety, weather concerns, burnout. We're going to talk about burnout here in a few minutes, worrying about increasing regulations, and farm transfer concerns. We're at the top of the list. But in addition to that, women take on many roles, and this was from one of our respondents. They work full-time on the farm. They have a part-time job in town. They're volunteering, they're raising children, and in some cases, they might be working with their in-laws or their own parents, aging. So they're often the sandwich generation. They're working with kids, they're working with older adults, and they're trying to juggle all these different things, and they feel super stretched. And often women in agriculture, um, and women in general, I think, serve as a linchpin for their farming operation, for their families. They have their own stressors, but then they take on the stress of their children, their spouse, their parents, their in-laws, and whoever else is out there and whoever they're volunteering with. And that's just kind of the norm of most women, not all, but most. So, I think some of these results are interesting, and you can see the stressors, and now we're going to lead into the stress, and Monica is going to take a deeper dive into this. As we said, she is the professional in the room that on mental health, and we'll just have you take it away, Monica.
All right. Thanks, Doris, for setting the stage for this discussion for the next half of the presentation here. And when we were putting this together, really the purpose is twofold. One is that you're in agriculture, you may be working directly with producers. And so a piece of this is understanding the very stressful and unique situation they're in. The other part of this, though, is for you, for addressing the stress that you're feeling in your lives, in your work. We want to support you because we know you support farmers, and without you, agriculture is not where it should be, right? We need you. We need you. Okay. So think of that from a kind of a twofold standpoint. One, sure, we're talking about the people you serve in the egg producers, but on a bigger level, we're talking about you and wanting to give you some tips and strategies to help manage the stress that you're feeling, which was so apparent in that first word cloud, just all of the things that weigh on you. So I'm going to start out by talking about stress. What happens to us in our brains and bodies when we get stressed? I'm going to talk just for a little bit on compassion fatigue, which you could also say burnout, very similar. And then we will get into what do we do? How do we manage the pressure and the stress and the mental exhaustion that comes our way so that we are okay, so that we can be there for our families, so that we can be healthy mentally and physically. So let's just start out with stress and talking through what it means. And I'm going to talk you through a stress response because I think it's important for us to know when we get stressed why things happen the way they happen, why we feel the way we feel, why we say what we say. And it is very rooted in what's happening in our brains when we're stressed. I'll be running through all of this fairly quickly just because of limited time, but we'll be giving my contact information at the end so you absolutely can get in touch with me if you want more. But in short, the stress response begins with a stressful incident. So something has happened, or we see something, or we hear about something, and that information goes into our brains to this little almond-sized piece of our brain called the amygdala. And in the amygdala, all of our memories and emotions are stored together. So it acts kind of as a filter. Like, has this happened to me before in any shape or form? And if it has, was it bad? If bad, then the stress response continues. If this has happened to us before and it's been okay, or it's been neutral, or there hasn't really been a negative response, then we're okay. we don't have that stress response happen. But all too often, when we're balancing all the things and dealing with all the words that came up on that word cloud, there's history there. Like, we've experienced these things before. They've been stressful before. Now they're coming at us again. And guess what? That little part of our brain is saying it's going to be bad again. So that danger signal goes to the hypothalamus, which sends out messages to the whole rest of our body through our nervous system. A number of things happen, and this is all a very immediate process. Adrenaline goes up, cortisol levels go up, heart beats faster, pulse rate and blood pressure go up, our breathing tends to get rapid and shallow, our senses get really sharp, and we release glucose and fats to give us energy so we can fight or flight, fight or flee. That's our those are the two most common stress responses. This is an innate process that's meant to be life-saving. And the example I use is, let's say we're out in the pasture and a bull comes running at us. Because of this, we do not have to run through our options. Thank goodness. We typically just run. If we didn't have this process built into our brains, we may sit and consider options. A, we could run. B, we could yell. C, we could play dead. All the things. Thankfully, we don't have to do that because it's our brain's job to keep us safe and keep us alive. So when a life or death stressor presents itself to us, we go into fight or flight and we do what we have to do to keep ourselves safe. So in the case of the bull chasing us, we just run. We don't have to think about it. That is great in the context of life or death. But within the context of daily life stressors, personal stressors, and work stressors, we have the same response, but it's not effective because we're not in life or death. So all these things will still happen to us: adrenaline, heartbeat, pulse rate, blood pressure, and then we hit fight or flight. And before we know it, we're unleashing on somebody, we're saying things we don't mean, or we're withdrawing and isolating. And that's our attempt to deal with the stress, but it's not effective. And you'll notice in that whole list right there of the things that happen when a stress response is happening in our brain, thinking is not on the list. So as our stress level goes up, as our emotions elevate, the thinking part of our brain, our prefrontal cortex, goes offline. There's a term for that. It's called the amygdala hijack. And it's so important to understand when it's happening and to get ourselves in a place where we can calm. We've got to get that thinking brain working again. Because when we're stressed and emotion is high and we're trying to work or communicate or be in relationships or parent kids or write a report or do research, all very, very difficult tasks. So from the farmer side of things, many of those folks have been in this stress response for a long time, chronic stress. So their ability to make decisions, to remember things, to problem solve, very limited. They'll forget, they won't follow up, they won't get you information you need, they'll have difficulty making decisions. It's chronic stress. And so for you as well, if you've been in this mode for a long time, you may find yourself losing things, forgetting things. Why is everything so hard? It's because that emotional part of your brain is up here and firing. The thinking, logical, rational part of your brain, very diminished. So in a snapshot, that's what happens to us when we are faced with stress. I want to tag on to that compassion fatigue. just so you are aware that that could be a part of the stress that you're experiencing. So a couple of quotes that define what compassion fatigue is. So the first one, Dr. Charles Figley, he's kind of known as the guru for compassion fatigue. But it is a state experienced by those helping people or animals in distress. It is an extreme state of tension and preoccupation with the suffering of those being helped to the degree that it can create a secondary traumatic stress for the helper. So we hear a lot about compassion fatigue in like first responders. So they are seeing trauma, they're helping people, they're seeing people die. It's traumatic. But compassion fatigue goes beyond that. As a counselor or therapist, I experience it just because day in and day out, I'm helping people work through really heavy life experiences. And sometimes those things kind of seep in, right? They seep in and they start to take a toll on me. I can't get it out of my mind. I'm thinking about them all the time. The same is true for you. If you are working with people that are chronically stressed, that are going through difficult circumstances, that are losing their farms, there's been farm accidents and injuries, suicide deaths, this can start to creep in. And you'll find yourself holding on to things and less able to separate work from personal life. So another quote I really like is this one: the expectation that we can be immersed in suffering and loss daily and not be touched by it is as unrealistic as expecting to be able to walk through water without getting wet. So we are going to be, it is normal human reaction and response when we are working with people that are suffering, that are traumatized, that are struggling, that we are going to start to feel that on some level. So what does it feel like? Here's a long list of symptoms. I'm not going to go through them all, but just some key ones that I'll touch on. Compassion fatigue can feel like exhaustion. You might feel a loss of being able to be sympathetic or empathetic. And then you may be feeling guilty that you feel like you don't care about these people or what they're going through. So it's this attack kind of coming internally and externally. You may find yourself coping with increased use of alcohol or drugs. You may dread when you get a call on your phone and you see it's a certain number. It just might be like, oh, not them again. You might start not enjoying your work. You might start taking a lot of time off. You might burn through your paid time off. You might be into unpaid time off, lots of sick days. You may be bringing things home with you and feeling not able to be present in your personal life because of what's sitting on your shoulders from your work or your profession. Now, a question often comes into play like, what is burnout as compared to compassion fatigue? And the two fit together very closely, and there's different schools of thought. One school of thought is that burnout is really about external circumstances. It's workload, it's environment, office setting, it's coworkers, it's stressors outside of yourself that you're dealing with. So sometimes with burnout, the thought is we can get some of those things in line, get us better lined up with what our passion is in our work, and that burnout will subside. Another school of thought is that burnout is a piece of compassion fatigue. It's not really separate from it. It contributes to it, and it is a part of it. So when we talk about healing from compassion fatigue, this is going to tie right in with stress. I just love this little piece of information that Mother Teresa wrote in her plan to her superiors that it was mandatory for her nuns to take an entire year off from their duties every 4 to 5 years to allow them to heal from the effects of their caregiving work. Now think about that. Think of how our stress level, compassion fatigue, would be altered if we knew at the end of 4 to 5 years, we just get to take a little sabbatical. Like we can rest, we can pour ourselves into our hobbies, we can have that time to let our brains recover from the stress. Not realistic, right? For the vast majority of us, that is just not where we're at. That we're going to be expected to remain in the fight, in the battle of whatever our work is for the long term. Now, that can feel daunting. And that brings us to the next piece of this presentation that we're going to spend the rest of our time here on. And that is getting through when we can't just escape. Like we can take our weekends off, we can take vacations, we absolutely should be doing our hobbies, but we're not going to be able to take a year off every 4 to 5 years. We've got to find ways to cope when we're kind of in the heat of it, right? If we don't find good, positive ways to cope when we're in the midst of that stress or that compassion fatigue, the burnout, we will absolutely begin to see the impacts on our health, on our relationships, on the quality of our work. It will permeate our life if we don't have good, solid coping strategies to help get us through. So that brings us to resilience. Definitely a word that is used a lot. I think especially since COVID, we've just kind of overused the word, but it's a good word, so we're going to stick with it. And I like using it with people in agriculture because we work all the time to make our crops more resilient, to make our animals more resilient, so we can have really good production, healthy plants, healthy animals, healthy soil. And we do that very intentionally. Like it's not a question that that's the goal of agriculturalists, producers to work on. But we don't intentionally, most of us, do the same thing with ourselves so that we can build that resilience in ourselves so that we are stronger, we produce better, we communicate better, we feel better physically and mentally. So that's the goal here. In the midst of all that life is throwing at you, how do we be okay? And it's all about building resilience, which is really basically the ability to navigate adversity and to grow and to thrive from challenges. So we're not going to get out of the challenges, and we don't necessarily want to, because that's what makes us who we are. That's when we learn, that's when we grow, but it's hard. So how do we get through having learned, not having been crushed by them? Other definitions: the ability to withstand or recover quickly from difficult conditions, the ability to recoil or spring back into shape after bending, stretching, or being compressed. So this notion of like we can go through difficult things and we may have to kind of hunker down and really focus in during those times, but we will come through it having learned and grown and be stronger. Okay, at the core of resilience are protective factors. Now, protective factors are the things in our lives that get us through. Often, you know what, when we have this conversation about children, our job as parents is to build protective factors around our kids, offering them shelter and food and security and safety and love, and help them problem solve, help them navigate relationships, all the things that provide them with a good start so that when they leave us, then they continue developing those protective factors in their life. Some children are born into situations where there are just a whole lot of risk factors. They're born into instability and unsecure situations. They're born with not knowing where their next meal is coming from. Lots of things that make it hard for them, more difficult for them to get through difficult times. So what we're going to be talking about here in the next about 10 minutes or 8 minutes is, what are those protective factors that you can build into your life to increase resilience to get through times of stress and struggle. All right. So first thing, and we may skip this poll just for time's sake because you've already answered it. But in your mind, and think more broadly than work, think life. What adversity, challenges, or struggles are you facing? Maybe we will do it quick. Let's just do it quick. In one word, go ahead and text in or type in one adversity, struggle, or challenge you are facing. One word. If it's not going to load up, we are going to just keep on going. Okay, well, it's not loading up. So if you typed it in, you've got it in front of you. That's good. First protective factor we're going to talk about is our spiritual protective factor. What that means is not sitting in church on a Sunday morning necessarily, or a religious practice, although it could be that. But what our spiritual protective factor is for us is what we build into our lives that gives us hope for the future. When we think about things like suicide, at the core of suicide is hopelessness. So when we talk spiritual protective factor, such an important component of getting through difficult times. So think about that for you. What is your spiritual protective factor? What gives you hope for the future? What feeds your soul? What do you hang on to when difficulty comes? The point of this is, when we are heading into or are in the midst of difficult times, we want to make intentional effort to pour energy into whatever that protective factor is, that spiritual protective factor. It might be prayer, it might be going to church, it might be meditation, it might be being in nature, it might be volunteering, it might be going fishing. It can be a lot of different things. What is it for you? So think about that and maybe jot it down. On the same note, what are we holding on to that is inhibiting us from really building that protective factor? Are we hanging on to negative feelings and thoughts about ourselves? Are we hanging on to unrealistic expectations of others? Are we hanging on to bitterness from the past? What are you hanging on to that if you let go of it, it would bring a lot of relief and freedom? You can put your mental and emotional energy into a different place. Okay, we're going to keep going here just because of time. We'll skip some of these polls. Then there's the social protective factor. The social protective factor is all about who we surround ourselves with. Now, again, when we're in the heat of tough times, of stressful times, when we're feeling depleted, and this is true for farmers too, one of the biggest risk factors is isolation. We absolutely want to be sure that we are not pulling away from people as a kind of a response or negative coping strategy to stress. And what I tell people is, You don't have to, if you're not comfortable talking about what's happening for you, you don't have to talk about that with your people. Just be around them, do things with them, engage with them in whatever way that looks. This is also an important time to kind of take stock of who am I allowing to be in my life that is not positive. Who am I allowing to be in my life that cuts me down, that is not a help when I am in these really difficult times? Sometimes those people, they're people that we can't exactly boot out of our lives because maybe we're married to them. Maybe they're our parents or our adult kids. So they're in our lives. How do we mitigate their negative impact? And that becomes all about setting boundaries, like not opening ourselves up, not engaging in conflict. We're really protecting ourselves with who we let in. And people that are in our lives that we can't, choose to end the relationship with, then we're building boundaries so that they have less impact mentally and emotionally to us. So I just love this little statement. There are good days and bad days, but how are you going to handle the bad days? Turning to someone or something that will increase your level of satisfaction with the work you're doing, remind you that you are good at what you do and what you do is very important. Someone that will remind you why you are doing this work, and someone that will remind you that the successes and joys far outnumber the failures and setbacks. That is what we want to have built into our lives with the right people around us. Okay, what is the status of your support system? Let's do this one really quick because this is just a letter, if it will load. Oh, I'm not seeing this one load either. Okay, we're going to keep going. Last one, and this one, oh goodness, I could talk for hours just on this because this is really the nature of the counseling and the therapy that I do. And if you've ever been to counseling, it's probably what you spent a lot of time working on. And that is our psychological protective factor. It is our mindset. It is what is going to get us through difficult times with resilience. So what does that mean? Resilient thinking is forward focused, it's problem solving, it's positive. It is not looking back with regret. It is not blaming others. It is not victim mentality. It is very focused and forward thinking. It works for us versus against us. So intentional thinking is not allowing every thought that runs through our mind to stick, especially the self-deprecating ones that are centered around I'm not any good at this, I can't do anything right, I'm always screwing up, I'm always failing. Not helpful. So just a kind of a last thing to leave with you here. Our thoughts create our feelings. So our thoughts, what you think about, drives how you feel. How you feel drives how you function, your actions, your behavior, your functioning. That reinforces your original thought. And so it can become a very negative pattern, kind of a vicious cycle, or it can be good. But thoughts like, I can't do anything right, lead to feelings of discouragement, despondency, worthlessness, maybe overwhelm, frustration, anger. So when we're carrying those emotions, it impacts how we function. We're not feeling good motivational energy. We're not able to focus. We will be dropping the ball. And then that reinforces our original thought that I can't do anything right. And it goes and it goes and it goes. And really the best exit from that vicious cycle is through our thinking. How do we get our thoughts working for us? How do we reframe them? Instead of I'm constantly screwing up, you can reframe that to I am learning. I'm getting better every day. Good things are happening. So again, I could talk for an hour just on this, but just to plant a little seed for you that if you don't like how you're feeling, take a little step back and tune into what are you thinking about that's causing that emotion or that feeling. Okay. So encouragement for you to set goals. And then the biggest piece, the most difficult piece is that intentionality, being intentional about us, building our protective factors to get through times of stress and compassion fatigue. So Doris, would you like to quickly run through some program info and then we'll open it up for some questions?
Sure. One thing that we found that is really important, is to have a support group, but also have topics that can be covered that might be, this isn't kind of a one and done webinar that we're doing here. Really, this takes intentional effort as time goes on. And so we've got a couple of programs that we just wanted to highlight, and this is also in the materials that were attached to the webinar here. There's Cultivating Resiliency for Women in Agriculture. We do welcome people that identify other than women, so you're welcome to attend. These are anonymous sessions, so no one's going to see you, but we have a coffee chat that happens monthly, and we also do educational webinars and have a bunch of things that are recorded as well that might help you in some of these different areas like we've been talking about today. And then also we have the Rural Resiliency Project, which is a little different take on this. We do some educational segments in our circles that we have monthly, and then we have an anonymous discussion as well. A lot of people like that anonymity because they don't want to be talking about their professional, personal lives and have other people know about them, but it's a really good release for many people, so we invite you to be part of those. And then of course our educational webinars similar to what we've done here today, and just some feedback that we've had from some of that work that we've done. It really has made a difference in a lot of people's lives, and we hope that you join us, and we think that it could help make a difference in your life as well. So with that, we will turn things over for the Q&A to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much, Doris and Monica. It's an excellent session for us to listen from both of you. We are looking into questions from the audience. Please feel free to put it in the chat. I will kickstart with one question. How do you know when it is just stress, Monica, versus when something is impacting mental health? If you have any insights, that will be really great.
That is a really good question. And I don't, the stress response can be very quick and be done, or it can really plague us for a long period of time. So I think the best thing to do in terms of knowing is this more than just stress, is it impacting my mental health and well-being, is really looking at your functioning and your relationships. Is the quality of your work going downhill? Are you losing motivation? Is communication with your loved ones and family altered, so it's not as effective? Is there more conflict in your life? So really stepping back and taking note from a holistic standpoint, like, is my health okay, or is my health starting to take a hit? Really that holistic view of social relationships, physical and mental, emotional health, and work quality and productivity. If that's going in a direction you don't want it to go, then it's impacting wellness, mental wellness.
Right, and there's always there's some good stress as well. So stress gets us to accomplish things, but it can go south pretty quickly, and that and you might not always recognize it. So it might be somebody else pointing it out to you as well.
Yes. Good point, Doris.
That's really great. And one more question, and then I will hand it over to Susan. I think to your point, Doris, how can I recognize when it is too much? Too much is too much. For example, we have a lot of people in this room, in this webinar, who are students, professionals, farmers, and educators. So, such as perfectionism or needing to have too much control over a situation or product, when to let it go. I think that
Mm,
would be helpful.
Oh, that's an excellent question. I think Monica and I both could weigh in on this. And, I will be honest, it took me decades to realize that too much was too much for me. I can remember being in well, even as an undergrad, but being in grad school and stressing out over things and just obsessing about things. And actually, during COVID, I actually finally realized it came to me. I had an epiphany. It's like, why are you doing this to yourself? Because nobody and nothing is perfect. You can move to excellence, but and sometimes, and nobody told me this. I mean, you're a high performer, you push, 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 you wear a lot of hats, you're juggling everything, but you can't keep doing that. It's exhausting. And you're not going to have control over everything. And it took me a long time, and part of it was through some of the work that we've all have been doing for me to finally say, oh, I've been doing that myself.
mhm.
Monica.
Um, I think I just put in the chat, often at the core of perfectionism and control is fear, that we're
Hmm.
afraid of something. And so we work hard to hold on and do everything perfect. And so there's some deep dive, I guess, into what's going on, what's really going on. What is that fear about? Is it expectations that have been placed on us as a child? And or are we, I have many farmers that are still working hard to live up to dad's expectations, and dad's been dead for 10 years. And
Yep.
so we really need to take a deep dive. Um, I also see in chat a question from the audience. Could you outline a few strategies for recentering yourself and getting back in a productive headspace throughout the workday? Yes. Never underestimate the positive impact of some slow, deep breaths. Like if you're feeling like your emotions are getting up here, slow, deep breaths, go for a little walk, maybe cold water on my hands, cold water on my face, just to help the brain reset. Because when think of a teeter totter or a seesaw, if our emotions are up here, our thinking, rational, logical, problem solving brain down here. So we need to go for calm and rational and really work on what is that for you. Is it slow, deep breaths? Is it taking a little walk, listening to music? Is it reprioritizing, getting that thinking brain back online?
Well, removing yourself from the computer. Sitting
Mm-hmm.
at the computer is not going to solve your problem. Walking away from it for a while is a huge thing.
I see another one. We're just down to a minute and a half here. Going the next step of this topic, do you have tips, suggestions on how to best interact with ranchers and farmers who are going through a stressful time to help them navigate their challenges? Yes, resources are great. Also helping them get into problem solving mindset, focus on what they control versus what is outside of their control. So often I will just use the phrase, let's make a plan. This has
Yep.
happened. You're dealing with this. Let's make a plan. What is within your control?
And in that plan, making a list. People that are super stressed out don't remember things. So helping
Write it
them make a
down.
list, write it down.
Great. I think we are almost close to the
Yes.
questioning session. Passing it to Susan. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you. And we did post the mental health wellness resource PDF. Jamie took care of that, so thank you, Jamie. So everybody should be able to access that. If you can't, you can always reach out to me at schapman@sciencesocieties.org, and I'd be happy to resend that over to you. So thank you, Doris and Monica, for sharing your expertise and insights for today's webinar. So important. And to Dr. Manavalan for her time moderating the topic. For those of you in our webinar audience, the Women in Science Committee will also be presenting a workshop titled Cultivating Resiliency at the annual meeting, at the Canvas meeting. So watch for that on your registration form. And then just in closing, again, thank you so much for joining us for this important topic. And please watch for a really short survey that we hope you can all take a minute to complete. And with that, thank you and have a great afternoon.